Captain Wu Jin stared at the display screen with growing confusion. His ship Dominion's Edge had been patrolling the outer rim of Vega Sector for 3 months without seeing anything more interesting than space dust and the occasional asteroid. The Caltharian Empire controlled this region of space completely and had done so for 800 years. Nothing moved through these star systems without Imperial permission, and nothing had challenged their authority for longer than anyone could. Remember, the gravitational scanner had picked up something strange 15 minutes ago. Wu Jin had ordered his crew to run the scan 3 times to make sure the equipment was working properly. Each time, the results came back the same. There was something out there that was bending space around itself in ways that should not be possible. Lieutenant Dao Su operated the main sensor array from his station near the back of the bridge. He was young but skilled and had never given Wu Jin bad information before. Dao Su looked up from his controls with an expression that mixed excitement with worry. The readings showed a solid object approximately 200 meters long and 50 meters wide. The shape was sleek and smooth with curves that seemed to flow like water frozen in metal. No sharp edges or angular sections like Imperial ships always had. Wu Jin had served in the Imperial Navy for 25 years and had seen every type of ship in their vast fleet. He had also studied the vessels of every known alien species in the galaxy. This thing matched nothing in his memory or in the ship's extensive computer database. The computer had spent 10 minutes searching through millions of recorded ship designs and had found 0 matches. The unknown vessel hung motionless in space about 50,000 kilometers away from their position. It showed no energy signatures that their sensors could detect. No heat radiation from engines or power systems. No electromagnetic emissions from computers or communication equipment. No signs of life support systems or artificial gravity generators. Yet something that large could not exist without producing some kind of detectable energy. Ensign Kyung Ho monitored the communication systems and had been trying to contact the mystery ship since they first detected it. He had sent messages on every frequency the Empire used for first contact situations. He had broadcast in 12 different languages, including the common trade language that most spacefaring species understood. The alien ship had not responded to any of their attempts at communication. Wu Jin ordered his crew to maintain a safe distance while they gathered more information. The standing orders from Imperial Command were clear about unknown contacts. Do not approach until you know what you are dealing with. Do not take hostile action unless directly threatened. Gather as much data as possible and report everything to headquarters immediately. The ship's computer worked continuously to analyze the strange readings coming from the alien vessel. The gravitational distortion around it suggested some kind of propulsion system that could manipulate space and time itself. This was theoretical technology that Imperial scientists had dreamed about for centuries, but had never been able to create. The energy requirements alone should have been impossible for a ship that size to generate. Dao Su reported that passive scans showed the hull was made from materials that did not match anything in their database. The metals seemed to absorb certain types of radiation while reflecting others in patterns that made no scientific sense. The surface appeared to be completely smooth, without any visible seams or joints. No windows or airlocks could be detected anywhere on the hull. Wu Jin felt a cold feeling growing in his stomach as he realized what this meant. In 800 years of galactic expansion, the Caltharian Empire had encountered dozens of alien species. Some had been primitive and were easily conquered or absorbed into the Empire. Others had been more advanced and had required longer campaigns to defeat. A few had been roughly equal in technology and had become trading partners or minor allies, but none had ever possessed technology that was clearly superior to Imperial capabilities. The unknown ship began to move without any visible means of propulsion. No engine flames or energy discharges appeared on their sensors. It simply started, gliding through space as smoothly as a fish swimming through water. The movement was so graceful and effortless that it seemed more like natural motion than artificial propulsion. Lieutenant Dao Su's voice cracked slightly as he reported the ship's acceleration rate. The alien vessel was moving faster than any Imperial ship could achieve even with maximum engine power. Yet their sensors still detected no energy signatures from engines or drive systems. Whatever technology was moving, that ship operated on principles that Imperial science did not understand. Wu Jin ordered his helmsman to follow the alien ship at maximum safe distance. Dominion's Edge was a fast reconnaissance vessel designed for exactly this type of mission, but they could barely keep pace with the unknown craft even at full acceleration. The alien ship seemed to be testing their capabilities, or perhaps leading them somewhere specific. For 6 minutes, they played this strange game of follow the leader through empty space. The alien ship would accelerate and change direction while Dominion's Edge struggled to keep up and maintain sensor contact. Wu Jin began to suspect that the unknown vessel was deliberately staying within their sensor range when it could have easily outrun them completely. Then, without any warning, the alien ship simply vanished. One moment it was clearly visible on all their sensors, and the next moment it was gone as completely as if it had never existed. Dalsu ran emergency diagnostics on all sensor systems, while Kyung-ho searched every communication frequency for any trace of the departed vessel. Ensign Yun-seo checked the navigation computers to make sure they had recorded the exact location where the ship had disappeared. The entire encounter had lasted exactly 17 minutes from first detection to final disappearance. 17 minutes that would change everything the Caltharian Empire thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. 17 minutes that would eventually lead to the fall of the most powerful civilization in known space. Wu Jin ordered his communications officer to send an encrypted message to Imperial headquarters immediately. This was information that needed to reach the highest levels of command as quickly as possible. The message included all sensor data from the encounter, along with his complete tactical analysis of what they had observed. The response from headquarters came back within 2 hours. Admiral Kite himself had reviewed their report and was ordering Dominion's Edge to return to base immediately for full debriefing. Additional ships were being dispatched to search the area where the alien vessel had vanished. The Emperor's science advisors wanted to examine every piece of data they had collected. As Dominion's Edge turned toward home, Wu Jin stared out at the star field where the unknown ship had disappeared. In 25 years of military service, he had never felt as unsettled as he did at this moment. Something had just demonstrated technology that made the mighty Imperial fleet look primitive by comparison. Something had penetrated the most secure region of Imperial space without triggering any alarms or defensive systems. Most disturbing of all was the feeling that this had not been a chance encounter. The alien ship had appeared in exactly the right place and time to be detected by a routine patrol. It had stayed visible just long enough for them to gather detailed sensor readings. It had tested their pursuit capabilities before vanishing completely. This felt less like an accidental first contact and more like a deliberate reconnaissance mission. Unknown to Captain Wu Jin, the strange ship had not really disappeared. Advanced sensors far beyond Imperial technology were still watching Dominion's Edge as it departed the area. The brief encounter had served its purpose perfectly. After 3,000 years of careful preparation, humanity had just completed their final intelligence-gathering mission. Soon, it would be time to reveal themselves to their ancient enemies and collect the debt that was long overdue. Admiral Kite stood in the center of the Imperial War Room, surrounded by holographic displays showing star charts and sensor data from across the galaxy. The report from Captain Wu Jin had arrived 3 days ago and had already changed everything about how the Empire viewed their security. For the first time in 8 centuries, an unknown force had penetrated their most protected space and demonstrated technology that Imperial scientists could not explain. Dr. Sang-ho adjusted his glasses and pointed to the detailed analysis his team had completed on the alien ship's sensor signature. The gravitational readings suggested a propulsion system that could fold space around the vessel instead of pushing through it with conventional engines. This was technology that existed only in theoretical research papers written by the Empire's most advanced physicists. No one had ever built anything that could actually manipulate space-time in this way. Professor Min-seo sat at her workstation, reviewing the mathematical models her research team had created to explain the unknown ship's disappearance. The energy requirements for true invisibility would be enormous, but the sensor data showed no power signatures at all during the 17 minutes of contact. Either the aliens possessed energy generation capabilities far beyond Imperial understanding, or they had developed some completely different approach to advanced technology. Commander He Jin had spent 40 years building and managing the Imperial intelligence network that monitored every corner of known space. Her agents operated on hundreds of worlds and maintained contact with dozens of alien species throughout the galaxy. None of them had ever reported anything like the vessel that Wu Jin had encountered. This ship had appeared from nowhere with no prior intelligence warnings or diplomatic contact attempts. The Emperor himself had attended the morning briefing session and had listened to each expert's analysis with growing concern. Emperor Taiwan had ruled the galaxy for 30 years and had never faced a situation where Imperial technology appeared to be inferior to an unknown force. The Empire's strength was built on their absolute military and technological superiority over all other species. If that advantage was gone, then everything could change very quickly. Kite activated the main display screen and showed the assembled experts the most disturbing information they had discovered. Over the past 6 months, there had been 17 separate incidents of unexplained sensor contacts across Imperial space, ships appearing briefly on long-range scanners before vanishing without explanation, gravitational anomalies detected near important military installations, communication interference in regions where no natural phenomena could account for the disruption. Each incident had been investigated separately and dismissed as equipment malfunction or natural space phenomena. The Imperial military was so confident in their control of the galaxy that they had not looked for patterns that might indicate coordinated intelligence gathering by an unknown force. Only after Wu Jin's detailed encounter report did the connections become obvious. Dr. Sang Ho's research team had mapped all 17 incidents on a three-dimensional star chart, and the pattern was unmistakable. The unknown contacts had systematically surveyed every major Imperial military base, important industrial center, and strategic transportation hub. Someone had been conducting a comprehensive intelligence operation against the Empire for months without being detected. Lieutenant Colonel Dong Hyun commanded the Empire's rapid response forces and had been advocating for immediate military action since the briefings began. In his opinion, any unknown force capable of penetrating Imperial space represented a direct threat that required an immediate and overwhelming response. But Admiral Kaite was reluctant to authorize military deployment against targets they could not locate or even properly detect. The investigation expanded to include analysis of reports from Imperial outposts and patrol ships throughout the galaxy. Lieutenant Minjai from the Intelligence Analysis Division had been reviewing communication logs from the past year, looking for any mentions of unusual contacts or unexplained phenomena. What she found painted an even more disturbing picture of systematic surveillance. Mining operations in the Centauri system had reported equipment failures and communication blackouts that followed no predictable pattern. Trade convoys traveling between major Imperial worlds had experienced navigation, computer glitches, and sensor malfunctions in regions where such problems had never occurred before. Diplomatic missions to allied worlds had been delayed by unexpected technical difficulties with their spacecraft. Professor Min Seo's team realized that these seemingly random technical problems formed another pattern when mapped against the confirmed sensor contacts. The unknown force was not just observing Imperial operations, but was actively testing their defensive systems and technological capabilities. Each incident provided valuable intelligence about Imperial weaknesses and response procedures. Commander Hae Jin assigned her best field agents to investigate the most promising leads from their expanded analysis. Agent So Young was dispatched to review security recordings from the Centauri mining operation. Agent Tae Hyun traveled to interview the crews of affected trade convoys. Agent Ji-won began a systematic review of all unexplained technical failures reported by Imperial facilities over the past 2 years. The results of these field investigations were even more alarming than the original sensor contact reports. Security recordings from multiple locations showed brief glimpses of unidentified objects in areas where no ships should have been present. Trade convoy crews described seeing strange lights and unexplained sensor readings during their unexplained technical difficulties. Imperial facility technicians had found evidence of sophisticated computer intrusions that left no trace of their origin or purpose. Dr. Sang Ho's analysis of the accumulated evidence led to a conclusion that shook the foundations of Imperial confidence. The unknown force possessed stealth technology that could make their ships effectively invisible to Imperial sensors. They had demonstrated the ability to interfere with Imperial computer systems without leaving detectable traces. Most importantly, they had been operating freely throughout Imperial space for an extended period without being discovered. Admiral Kite convened an emergency session of the Imperial Defense Council to brief senior military commanders on the scope of the threat they now faced. General Hyun-woo commanded the Imperial ground forces and had initial difficulty accepting that any alien force could have penetrated their security so completely. Admiral Su-jin controlled the main Imperial fleet and immediately began developing response protocols for dealing with invisible enemy ships. The debate in the Defense Council lasted for 8 hours as military leaders struggled to develop strategies for confronting an enemy they could not reliably detect or locate. Traditional Imperial military doctrine assumed that their technological superiority would allow them to identify and engage any threat with overwhelming force. These assumptions no longer applied to their current situation. Professor Min Seo presented. Her team's theoretical analysis of the advanced technology demonstrated by the unknown force. The ability to manipulate gravitational fields suggested mastery of physics that Imperial science was only beginning to understand. True invisibility technology would require energy generation and control systems far beyond current Imperial capabilities. Most disturbing was the possibility that these technological advantages were just the beginning of what their unknown opponents could accomplish. Commander Hye-jin's intelligence analysts had been working around the clock to develop profiles of possible alien species that might possess such advanced capabilities. Every known civilization in the galaxy had been evaluated and eliminated as potential sources of the mysterious technology. This led to the unsettling conclusion that they were dealing with a completely unknown force that had somehow remained hidden until now. Emperor Taewon made the decision to place the entire Imperial military on heightened alert status while maintaining official silence about the nature of the threat. Public knowledge of Imperial technological inferiority could lead to civil unrest and rebellion among subject species who had been kept in line through fear of Imperial military power. The investigation would continue, but with absolute secrecy, maintained at all levels. The meeting concluded with assignments for expanded intelligence gathering and defensive preparations throughout Imperial space. New sensor networks would be deployed to detect gravitational anomalies that might indicate the presence of invisible ships. Computer security systems would be upgraded to defend against sophisticated intrusion attempts. Military response teams would be positioned to react quickly to any future contact with unknown vessels. As the senior officers departed to implement their new orders, Admiral Kite remained alone in the war room staring at the star charts that showed the extent of Imperial territory. For 800 years, this had been their galaxy, and no force had been able to challenge their dominance. Now, something was out there watching them and testing their defenses with technology that made Imperial capabilities look primitive. The question was no longer whether they would face this unknown enemy, but when and how the confrontation would begin. Lieutenant Jae-young had been monitoring deep space communications from the research station Imperial Glory for 6 months, without detecting anything more interesting than background radiation and the occasional automated beacon from passing trade ships. His assignment to the Outer Rim listening post was supposed to be a quiet rotation where young officers learned advanced sensor operation without the pressure of active military operations. Everything changed when his equipment detected something that should not have existed. The signal was incredibly faint and buried so deep within cosmic background radiation that their standard communication systems had missed it completely. Only the experimental deep space monitoring array had been sensitive enough to detect the transmission, and even then, it required extensive computer analysis to separate the artificial signal from natural space phenomena. Jae-young spent 3 days verifying his readings before he dared to report the discovery to his superiors. Dr. Min Seo arrived at Imperial Glory within 48 hours of receiving Jae-young's preliminary report. She brought with her a team of the Empire's most advanced communications specialists and computer analysts. The signal was unlike anything they had encountered before and represented technology that was decades ahead of current Imperial capabilities. The amount of information compressed into a single burst transmission exceeded the capacity of their most sophisticated computer systems. Professor Sang-ho joined the analysis team after reviewing the initial data from his laboratory on the Imperial capital world. The mathematical structure of the signal showed clear signs of artificial intelligence, but not the type of computer systems used by any known species. The encoding methods were completely foreign, yet somehow familiar, as if they were based on principles that Imperial scientists understood but had never thought to apply in this way. Commander Hye-jin established a security perimeter around Imperial. Glory and classified all information about the mysterious transmission at the highest levels of Imperial intelligence. Only a handful of people in the entire galaxy were authorized to know about the signal and its implications. The potential for panic among Imperial populations was enormous if word leaked that an unknown force possessed communication technology superior to their own. The breakthrough in decoding came after 2 weeks of continuous work by the combined analysis teams. Dr. Min Seo's graduate student Yun Ho discovered that the signal contained multiple layers of information encoded using different mathematical principles. When the layers were separated and analyzed individually, they revealed scientific data and technological specifications that were centuries ahead of Imperial knowledge. The decoded information included detailed proofs of theoretical physics concepts that Imperial scientists had been struggling with for generations, faster-than-light communication methods that did not require the massive relay stations used throughout Imperial space, energy generation techniques that could power entire star systems using resources that the Empire considered worthless. Most disturbing were the complete technical specifications for weapons systems that could destroy Imperial warships without leaving any detectable trace. Admiral Kite arrived at Imperial glory to personally review the decoded transmission data. What he found challenged everything the Empire believed about their technological superiority and their security. The unknown force had demonstrated mastery of science that made Imperial capabilities look primitive. They possessed detailed knowledge of Imperial technology and military procedures that could only have been gathered through extensive intelligence operations. Hidden within the scientific data was a message that made the implications of first contact even more frightening. The transmission was specifically addressed to the Caltharian Empire and contained references to Imperial history and military operations that were classified at the highest levels. Someone had been watching them for a very long time and knew far more about the Empire than the Empire knew about their watchers. Dr. Min Seo's team decoded the final layer of the transmission and discovered coordinates for a star system beyond the outer edge of Imperial territory. The message was clear in its intent. This was an invitation for direct contact at a specific location in space where the mysterious force would be waiting. The choice of meeting place was significant because it was in a region that Imperial scouts had surveyed but never claimed or developed. Captain Wu Jin was selected to lead the contact mission because of his previous encounter with the unknown ship. His vessel Dominion's Edge was equipped with the most advanced sensor and communication equipment available to the Imperial fleet. Additional ships were positioned throughout the region to provide support and to observe the meeting from multiple vantage points while remaining hidden from detection. The journey to the designated coordinates took 4 days using the fastest Imperial ships. During the transit, Admiral Kite reviewed every piece of intelligence they had gathered about the unknown force and prepared for multiple contact scenarios. The possibility of hostile action could not be ignored, but the technological superiority demonstrated by the mysterious transmission suggested that any military confrontation would be one-sided in favor of the unknown aliens. Lieutenant Dal Su reported sensor contact as soon as they arrived at the specified coordinates. A single ship waited in orbit around a dead world that had been scorched by some ancient catastrophe. The vessel was similar to the one that Wu Jin had encountered weeks earlier, but larger and more complex in design. Unlike their previous contact, this ship made no attempt to hide its presence and appeared to be waiting for the Imperial arrival. Captain Wu Jin ordered his communications officer to broadcast standard first contact protocols while maintaining defensive positions. The response came immediately and in perfect Imperial standard language. The unknown ship transmitted a simple message that changed everything the Empire thought they knew about galactic history. "We are humanity. We are the descendants of the species you destroyed 3,000 years ago. We survived. We evolved. We remember." Admiral Kite felt the blood drain from his face as the implications of that message became clear. 3,000 years ago, during the early expansion period of the Empire, there had been numerous conflicts with primitive alien species. Most of these early wars had been brief and one-sided, as Imperial technology overwhelmed any resistance. The official records described complete victories and the total elimination of all hostile alien forces. Commander Hyajin accessed the classified historical archives from her secure communication link with Imperial headquarters. The records from 3 millennia ago confirmed the existence of a species called humans who had inhabited a single world in an unremarkable star system. They had possessed primitive technology and had been confined to their home planet when Imperial forces arrived to claim their system for the Empire. The humans had refused the standard Imperial offer of submission and integration into the Empire. Instead, they had chosen to fight despite their obvious technological disadvantage. The war had lasted 6 months and had ended with the complete orbital bombardment of the human homeworld. Imperial records showed that all human population centers had been destroyed and that no survivors had escaped the planet before its destruction. Dr. Sang-ho realized the horrible truth as he reviewed the historical data. The Imperial forces had indeed destroyed the human homeworld and had eliminated the majority of the human population. But they had not been thorough enough to prevent some humans from escaping aboard primitive spacecraft before the final bombardment. A small portion of humanity had survived the destruction of their world and had spent 3,000 years preparing for this moment. The human ship transmitted additional information that painted a picture of incredible patience and determination. The survivors had wandered the galaxy for centuries aboard generation ships, while their populations slowly recovered from near extinction. They had encountered dozens of other species and had learned about the full extent of Imperial expansion and domination throughout known space. Professor Min Seo analyzed the technological specifications included in the human transmission and realized that humanity had not simply survived their exile. They had used their 3,000 years of wandering to advance their science and technology far beyond anything the Empire had achieved. Their mastery of physics and engineering had reached levels that Imperial scientists could barely comprehend. Captain Wu Jin requested permission to establish direct communication with the human ship to gather more information about their intentions. The response revealed the true scope of what the Empire now faced. Humanity had spent 3 millennia studying their ancient enemy and preparing for eventual confrontation. They had built alliances with other species that had suffered under Imperial expansion. Most importantly, they had developed technology that made the mighty Imperial fleet obsolete. The human transmission concluded with a simple statement that carried the weight of 3,000 years of preparation and planning. Justice delayed is not justice denied. We have returned to collect what is owed. The age of the Caltharian Empire ends now. Admiral Kite realized that they were not witnessing first contact with an unknown alien species. Admiral Kite convened an emergency session of the Imperial War Council within hours of receiving the shocking transmission from the human ship. The revelation that humanity had survived their ancient destruction and had returned with advanced technology sent waves of panic through the highest levels of Imperial command. Emperor Taewon himself attended the emergency briefing as senior military leaders struggled to understand the full implications of what they now faced. Dr. Sang-ho had spent the past 18 hours reviewing classified historical archives that detailed the Empire's early expansion campaigns. The records from 3,000 years ago painted a clear picture of Imperial military doctrine during that brutal period of galactic conquest. Alien species were given simple choices: submit to Imperial rule or face complete destruction. Most chose submission, but a few, like humanity, had chosen to fight despite hopeless odds. The historical files contained detailed reports from the campaign against the human homeworld. Fleet Admiral Chang Min had commanded the Imperial forces during the 6-month war, and his records described the humans as surprisingly resilient despite their primitive technology. They had fought with desperate courage and had managed to inflict significant casualties on Imperial forces before their final defeat and the orbital bombardment of their planet. Professor Min Seo analyzed the technical specifications that humanity had transmitted during their contact meeting. The advancement in their technology was beyond anything she had thought possible for a species that had been reduced to primitive generation ships 3 millennia ago. Their mastery of physics had reached levels that challenged fundamental assumptions about what was scientifically achievable. Commander Hyejin's intelligence teams had been working continuously to verify the human claims and to assess the scope of the threat they represented. Analysis of recent galactic events revealed a disturbing pattern that had been hidden in plain sight for years. Mysterious equipment failures throughout Imperial space, supply convoys that had disappeared without explanation, communication blackouts in strategic systems that had been blamed on natural phenomena or equipment malfunction. The intelligence analysis painted a picture of systematic infiltration and sabotage that had been ongoing for decades without Imperial forces recognizing the coordinated nature of these incidents. Human agents or allies had been operating throughout Imperial territory, gathering intelligence and weakening Imperial capabilities while remaining completely undetected by the Empire's security systems. Lieutenant Colonel Dong Hyun presented his tactical analysis of humanity's demonstrated capabilities and the implications for Imperial military planning. The human ships possessed stealth technology that made them effectively invisible to Imperial sensors. Their weapons systems appeared to be based on principles that Imperial science did not understand. Most disturbing was their apparent ability to disable Imperial equipment remotely without leaving any trace of the intrusion. Dr. Min Seo's research team had been analyzing the human transmission for additional intelligence about their technological capabilities. The data included specifications for faster-than-light communication systems that did not require the massive relay networks used throughout Imperial space. Energy generation methods that could power entire fleets using resources that Imperial science considered worthless. Most frightening were the complete technical manuals for weapons that could destroy Imperial warships without leaving any detectable evidence. General Hyun Woo commanded the Imperial ground forces and had been tasked with developing defensive strategies for protecting Imperial worlds from invasion. The challenge was enormous because traditional military planning assumed that Imperial forces would have technological superiority over any attacking force. The situation with humanity completely reversed those assumptions and required fundamentally different approaches to planetary defense. Admiral Su Jin controlled the main Imperial battle fleet and had been analyzing the implications of facing an enemy with superior stealth and weapons technology. Imperial naval doctrine was built around massive fleet engagements where overwhelming firepower could destroy any opposition. Against enemies that could remain invisible and strike without warning, these traditional tactics would be useless. Commander Hee Jin's field agents had been investigating the historical claims made by the human transmission. Agent So Young had located survivors from some of the Imperial expansion campaigns who could provide testimony about what had actually happened during those ancient wars. The stories they told were more brutal and systematic than the sanitized official records suggested. The testimony revealed that Imperial forces had routinely used orbital bombardment to destroy entire civilizations that refused to submit. Billions of sentient beings had been killed during the expansion period, and dozens of species had been driven to complete extinction. The Empire had built its dominance on a foundation of genocide that had been hidden from current Imperial populations who believed their ancestors had spread civilization throughout the galaxy. Agent Tai Hyun had been investigating reports of unusual activity in the Outer Rim territories beyond Imperial space. His findings suggested that humanity had not been wandering aimlessly during their 3,000-year exile. They had been systematically contacting other species and building alliances with civilizations that had survived Imperial expansion, or had developed in regions beyond Imperial control. Dr. Sang-ho realized the true scope of what the Empire now faced as the intelligence reports painted a picture of coordinated opposition throughout the galaxy. Humanity had spent 3 millennia building a coalition of species that had suffered under Imperial rule. They had shared their advanced technology with these allies and had been preparing for a coordinated campaign to overthrow Imperial dominance. The analysis of recent galactic communications revealed encrypted transmissions between dozens of worlds throughout Imperial space. These messages had been dismissed as background noise by Imperial monitoring systems, but when properly decoded, they revealed a vast network of resistance movements that had been coordinating their activities for years. The human return was not an isolated threat, but the signal for a galaxy-wide uprising. Professor Min Seo's team discovered additional layers of information hidden within the human transmission that revealed the true extent of their preparation. They had detailed intelligence about every major Imperial military installation, complete technical specifications for all Imperial weapons and defense systems, and comprehensive maps of Imperial supply lines and communication networks. This intelligence could only have been gathered through decades of systematic espionage. Captain Dong-wook had been analyzing the tactical implications of the human technological advantage, and his conclusions were devastating for Imperial military planning. The Empire's entire strategic doctrine was based on their ability to detect and engage enemy forces using superior technology and overwhelming numbers. Against enemies with advanced stealth capabilities and weapons that Imperial forces could not defend against, these advantages became meaningless. Admiral Kite presented the combined intelligence analysis to Emperor Taiwan and the assembled Imperial leadership. The conclusion was inescapable. The Empire faced an existential threat from an enemy that possessed superior technology, detailed intelligence about Imperial capabilities, and a galaxy-wide network of allies prepared to support their campaign. Traditional Imperial military. Advantages of superior numbers and firepower would be useless against opponents who could strike without warning and disappear before Imperial forces could respond. The Emperor listened to the briefings with growing alarm as the scope of the threat became clear. For 8 centuries, the Caltharian Empire had ruled the galaxy through technological superiority and military dominance. Now they faced enemies who had surpassed Imperial technology and had spent 3,000 years preparing for this confrontation. The fundamental assumptions that had supported Imperial power for nearly a millennium were no longer valid. Dr. Minseo delivered the final and most disturbing conclusion from her analysis of the human transmission. The technological specifications included in their message represented only a small sample of their actual capabilities. The weapons and systems they had revealed were described as obsolete models that had been superseded by more advanced technology. If humanity was casually sharing outdated technology that was decades ahead of Imperial science, then their current capabilities were beyond Imperial comprehension. Commander Heejin's intelligence summary painted the complete picture of what the Empire now faced. Humanity had returned not as refugees seeking justice, but as the leaders of a galactic coalition prepared to overthrow Imperial rule. They possessed technology that made Imperial forces obsolete, intelligence that revealed every Imperial weakness, and allies throughout the galaxy who were ready to rise in coordinated rebellion. The emergency session concluded with the sobering realization that the Caltharian Empire was no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. 8 centuries of unchallenged power had ended with the return of humanity and their allies. The war began at exactly 0800 Imperial Standard Time across 47 star systems simultaneously. Admiral Kite was reviewing defensive preparations in the Imperial War Room when every sensor station throughout the galaxy reported the same impossible readings. Human ships had materialized in orbit around every major Imperial world, every military installation, and every strategic facility without triggering a single alarm or defensive system. Captain Wu Jin commanded the defense of the Imperial capital, world, and watched helplessly as dozens of human vessels appeared around his planet like ghosts materializing from empty space. His sensors could detect their presence now that they had chosen to reveal themselves, but his weapon systems could not achieve target locks on ships that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The human ships were larger and more advanced than the vessels that Imperial forces had encountered during their previous contacts. These were not exploration craft or diplomatic vessels, but warships designed with technology that made Imperial military engineering look primitive. Their hulls seemed to bend light around themselves, and their weapon systems charged with energy, signatures that Imperial science could not identify or understand. Dr. Sang-Ho monitored the attack from his research facility and realized that humanity was demonstrating capabilities that exceeded even their most optimistic estimates of alien technological advancement. The human ships were not simply invisible to Imperial sensors, but were operating according to physical principles that challenged fundamental assumptions about space and time. They could appear and disappear at will while maintaining perfect coordination across vast distances. Commander Heijin's intelligence network reported similar attacks occurring throughout Imperial space with precision that indicated years of careful planning and preparation. Human forces had appeared at every critical infrastructure node simultaneously while avoiding civilian population centers. This was not a campaign of conquest or destruction, but a surgical dismantling of Imperial military and governmental control. The human attack strategy became clear within the first hour of the conflict. Rather than engaging Imperial fleets in direct combat, they were systematically destroying command and control systems while leaving most military personnel unharmed. Imperial commanders found themselves cut off from their fleets and unable to coordinate defensive responses while their ships remained intact but powerless to affect the outcome of the battle. Lieutenant Colonel Dong Hyun attempted to mount a counterattack from his ground command center, but discovered that human technology could disable Imperial equipment remotely without causing any detectable damage. His tanks and aircraft simply stopped functioning, while their crews remained unharmed. His communication systems went silent while power remained available for non-military purposes. The humans were demonstrating that they could neutralize Imperial military forces without resorting to mass destruction. Professor Minseo watched the technological demonstration from her laboratory and realized that humanity had not simply advanced beyond Imperial capabilities, but had transcended the limitations that Imperial science had assumed were absolute. Their ships moved through space without regard for conventional physics. Their weapons struck targets without traveling through the intervening distance. Their defensive systems made them invulnerable to any weapons that Imperial forces could deploy. Admiral Su Jin commanded the main Imperial battle fleet from her flagship and attempted to engage the human ships in direct combat. Her weapons fired continuously at targets that seemed solid on sensors but somehow avoided all incoming fire without visible movement or evasive maneuvers. The human ships returned fire with energy beams that passed through Imperial shields as if they did not exist and disabled Imperial vessels without destroying them. The pattern of human attacks revealed their true strategic objective within hours of the initial assault. They were not attempting to conquer Imperial territory or destroy Imperial populations, but were systematically liberating the worlds and species that had been subjugated during 8 centuries of Imperial expansion. Orbital defense platforms around enslaved worlds mysteriously lost power, while ground-based liberation movements suddenly found themselves equipped with advanced weapons and communication systems. General Hyun Woo received reports from across the galaxy describing coordinated uprisings on dozens of Imperial worlds. Species that had been suppressed for generations were rising in rebellion with human technology and tactical support. The resistance movements had detailed knowledge of Imperial defensive positions and procedures that could only have been provided through extensive intelligence sharing with human agents. Dr. Minseo analyzed the tactical data from the human attacks and made a discovery that explained their overwhelming technological superiority. Humanity had not simply improved existing technology, but had developed completely different approaches to physics and engineering. While Imperial science had focused on building more powerful versions of established principles, humanity had transcended those limitations entirely. Captain Dong-wook commanded a defensive squadron attempting to protect Imperial supply lines and discovered that human forces could strike anywhere throughout Imperial space without warning or effective resistance. His ships would receive distress calls from convoys under attack, but would arrive to find empty space and no trace of either the attackers or the cargo vessels. The humans could eliminate Imperial logistics capabilities while leaving no evidence of their presence. The collapse of Imperial resistance accelerated as human forces demonstrated their ability to coordinate attacks across the entire galaxy with perfect timing and precision. Commander He Jin's intelligence analysis revealed that the liberation movements on Imperial worlds had been planning their uprisings for years, while waiting for the human signal to begin simultaneous action. The human return had triggered a galaxy-wide revolution that the Empire could not contain or suppress. Admiral Kite realized that Imperial military doctrine had become obsolete within the first day of combat. The Empire's advantages of superior numbers and firepower were meaningless against enemies who could appear anywhere while remaining invulnerable to retaliation. Traditional defensive strategies assumed that attacking forces would need to travel through space and engage Imperial fleets in conventional battles. The humans had made such assumptions irrelevant through technological capabilities that Imperial forces could neither understand nor counter. Emperor Taewan received reports from across the galaxy describing the systematic dismantling of Imperial control without massive casualties or destruction. The humans were demonstrating that they possessed the power to destroy the Empire completely, but were choosing instead to disable Imperial military capabilities while allowing Imperial populations to survive. This restrained approach suggested strategic objectives beyond simple revenge for ancient atrocities. The final phase of the conflict began on the 3rd day, when human forces simultaneously appeared in orbit around the Imperial capital world and transmitted a message to all Imperial communication networks. Emperor Taiwan and his government were given 12 hours to announce the formal dissolution of the Caltharian Empire and the recognition of independence for all subjugated worlds and species. Dr. Sang Ho's analysis of human capabilities during the three-day conflict revealed technology that was centuries ahead of Imperial science in every measurable category. Their energy generation systems powered weapons that could disable entire fleets. Their propulsion technology allowed instantaneous travel across galactic distances. Their defensive systems made them effectively invulnerable to any weapons that Imperial forces could deploy. The Emperor's final transmission to Imperial forces throughout the galaxy acknowledged the reality that had become undeniable during 72 hours of one-sided conflict. The age of the Caltharian Empire was ending not through gradual decline, but through the overwhelming technological superiority of enemies who had waited 3,000 years for their moment of justice. Imperial military resistance was ordered to cease immediately to prevent unnecessary casualties among personnel who could not affect the outcome of the conflict. Admiral Kaite's last report to Imperial Command summarized the lessons learned during the brief and decisive war. The Empire had been defeated not through superior numbers or conventional military tactics, but through technological advancement that had made Imperial capabilities obsolete. Humanity had demonstrated that 8 centuries of Imperial dominance had been built on temporary advantages that could be surpassed by enemies with sufficient time and motivation for preparation. The aftermath of the conflict saw the rapid transformation of Imperial space into dozens of independent worlds and species that had been liberated from Imperial control. Human ships maintained their presence throughout the galaxy, but made no attempt to establish their own empire or impose human authority on the newly freed populations. Their mission appeared to be the restoration of freedom rather than the establishment of human dominance. Professor Minseo's final analysis of human technology revealed that their demonstrated capabilities during the war represented only a fraction of their actual advancement.